Hello and welcome to another edition of Word in the Burg. Today's topic, transportation, the changing map of Harrisburg and how it affects you. I'm Mayor Eric Pappenfuss, and we have three distinguished guests joining us here today. First we have Wayne Martin, City Engineer for Harrisburg. We also have Ambrose Buck, who's a project manager in our Department of Engineering and Planning. And we have Steve Deck, with the Executive Director with the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thank you.
There's so much exciting activity these days in the city of Harrisburg. You look and you have a new federal courthouse redefining the skyline. The state just announced the building of a new office structure for almost 1,000 employees in uptown Harrisburg. We've had the completion of two major projects in the past year with the South Harrisburg paving project and the 3rd Street multimodal project. People see the activity, businesses are investing, the population is beginning to grow. And at the heart of our vision for economic development is making Harrisburg a truly walkable city, making sure that pedestrians are our focus. And this is also the focus of our Vision Zero initiative, which is to eliminate traffic fatalities in the city of Harrisburg. Ambrose, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit, maybe a survey of what we're doing to focus on pedestrians in Harrisburg?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Pedestrians are our focus for all of our transportation projects. Mayor, the fact is, even if you drive into the city, take a bus, ride a bike, at some point you become a pedestrian. All of our transportation has to focus on the pedestrian aspect of transportation. Our goal is to have everyone want to live, work, and play in the city. You can't do that without a good transportation plan and without, accommodating the pedestrian aspect of transportation. We have quite a few projects in the queue that are multimodal in nature, but focused on pedestrian transportation. Just in the Mulder Square area, we have 36 ADA access ramps. We have about 1,000 square yards of sidewalk, 1,500 linear feet of curb, just in that Mulder Square neighborhood. We also have projects in the queue for Walnut Street, Chestnut Street, similar numbers of ADA ramps, sidewalks, etc. And that is going to build on the work that's been completed on 3rd Street.
Yeah, you can't go to a neighborhood in Harrisburg without seeing improvements in accessibility. I would estimate we've done hundreds, if not 1,000 ADA ramps in recent years. And it's really making every neighborhood in Harrisburg more accessible. Let's talk about one of the visible features that we're beginning to see. We see it on 3rd Street, we see it in other sections. Can you talk a little bit about the bump out and how that benefits pedestrians?
Certainly. Mayor, the important thing about a sidewalk and a traffic element like a bump out, the sidewalk isn't just a sidewalk. In a lot of cases, the sidewalk is someone's front yard. The streets are someone's neighborhood. The bump out is a key traffic calming element to slow cars down and to have a safer crossing over a throughway, a road, a street. The bump out does a couple of things. It slows cars down. It makes the vehicles have a more deliberate turning path, but it also shortens the distance that a pedestrian has to take when they're crossing a busy street. It also draws a driver's attention to, hey, this is an area where a pedestrian is going to be crossing. So there's a visual recognition, and it forces a driver to recognize that and take action.
It improves sight for both the driver and the pedestrian, decreases the distances and the crossing times, as you say, and but it's literally changing the map of Harrisburg. We're starting to see that more and more in all of our plans. Wayne, let's talk a little bit about bicyclists. Yes. You and I took a little heat my first year after being elected on Front Street. We convinced PennDOT to take what would have been basically a shoulder, a gutter, and instead turn it into a one-way bike lane that ran parallel to the new 2 lanes on Front Street. That was a lot of change for folks, and we said at the time that's just going to be the beginning of a series of interconnected grids and bike paths. Why is the focus on bicyclists important, and can we talk about some of the things that people will see upcoming here in 2020?
Right, so the next hierarchy, like you said, in the pedestrians first, bicyclists would be second, and the reason that wasn't mentioned that we focus on bicyclists and pedestrians goes back to our Vision Zero policy, which says these are the most vulnerable road users, and we need to focus some of our safety attention on them. You did mention the Front Street bike lane. Another key to that project was actually reducing the number of lanes on Front Street, which improves the pedestrian crosswalk. They still have the bike lane to look for. Takes some of those aggressive bicyclists off the path, at least those that are heading southbound. And statistically, the numbers have shown quite a reduction in crashes on that section of corridor. In fact, we have not, knock on wood, had a pedestrian hit in the section where the bike lane was installed. This past construction season, we did add about 3/4 mile of bike lane. There's a counterflow bike lane that's I say this past construction season because we're in 2020, but we're still finishing up some of the 2019 projects. There's a counterflow bike lane being installed on 3rd Street between Chestnut and Walnut. That'll be in conjunction with Sharrows on 3rd Street. That'll enable a connection from the Capitol complex to Chestnut Street, and then on Chestnut Street from the transportation center to the riverfront, Greenbelt loop, we have bike lanes being installed. So that's your 3/4 miles of bike lanes that are currently being installed. Next year, some of the projects that you had mentioned about the federal courthouse and stuff, there's about 3 miles of bike lanes going in. So there'll be a loop on 6th Street, cycle track on 7th Street, and then Boas and Riley. So there'll be a loop there. A 1.5 mile loop, both directions makes 3 miles. So, that'll help enable those employees of the federal courthouse via some of the other employer generators in that area to utilize bikes. The other thing the city has done a few years ago was the bike share program. The city basically granted permission for the bike share to be tested in the city, and the success has been pretty overwhelming. We have not heeded the advice to put away some of those stations because they've just been so successful and used throughout the year, which actually surprised us. So biking in the city is, it's always been used. We're just trying to make it a little bit safer. Maybe it encourages more bicyclists, but we do have a fair amount of commuters and residents that use bikes to commute. Maybe an equal amount that do it for recreation purposes. And in that vein, we were able to resurface the Riverwalk, Lower Riverwalk this past year, which is getting a lot of use like we expected it would.
Yeah. Now you use the term Sharrow, and behind you on the board we have a map of what a redesigned 2nd Street will look like, and you can see the Sharrow, which is basically the bike marking in the road, which is indicating be alert for bicyclists, share the road. You see that on 3rd Street, you'll see that in the redesign of 2nd Street. And you'll see this as we continue to pave and invest in our infrastructure throughout the city. Let's talk also a little bit about a brand new feature, which we're going to see on 3rd Street as the sort of final result of the multimodal project, which is a partnership with the Commonwealth and an effort to bring publicly accessible electrical vehicle charging stations.
Yeah, that was an exciting change. Timing couldn't have been better. We were just finishing paving on 3rd Street, or just starting, I guess, the paving on the downtown section of 3rd Street. When the EV charging station, I guess it's the Volkswagen settlement monies, became available through the Commonwealth to install electric vehicle charging stations, and with some close coordination with the Department of General Services, we converted an existing lane on 3rd Street between North and Forester Street to angled parking and are in the process of installing 4 vehicle charging stations, which will serve 8 vehicles. So there'll be eight bays. That angle parking will also improve traffic flows, believe it or not, taking a lane away. It's sort of counterintuitive, but it actually improved traffic flows in our model and our simulation. But it adds that capacity for electrical vehicle charging stations, which was sought after. I mean, we have only a handful in the city currently, but if you're going to commit to buying an electric vehicle, you're going to want more than one option for charging that vehicle in public space.
Great, thanks, Wayne. Steve, tell us a little bit about Tri-County Regional Planning. What do you do? What should the public know about the process of planning for not just the city, but for the whole region?
Sure. Tri-County Regional Planning has a number of different roles. You mentioned many of the development projects upcoming or in the works. We're part of that review process, trying to help make sure that those projects do come to fruition and are complementary of the rest of the development, not only in the city of Harrisburg, but we do the same work for Dauphin County as a whole, also Perry County. So regionally, we're helping with those projects moving forward. But from a transportation perspective, one of our key roles is we're responsible for within the 3 counties of helping to prioritize the use of federal funds for transportation improvement projects, mainly on the state road system, but the city is an example of a municipality that has a number of local roads that are eligible for federal funds. So we work with Wayne and others in helping to prioritize on a regional basis how those transportation funds are used to address safety, congestion, and the condition of our roadways throughout the region.
And there's basically a list, right?
Correct.
Called the TIP,
Right.
which prioritizes these. Can you talk about potential future projects that would affect the city?
Sure. We are actually, as a matter of fact, right now in the process of developing what is known as the 2021 TIP. So we do 4 years of projects at a time, and we do it every other year. So we're currently working under the 2019 TIP, but we are about mid-year this year going to be finalizing the 2021 TIP. Some key projects that are in the draft version of that that you might want to be aware of. First of all, it's not all about just maintaining the roads and the bridges. It's not all about moving cars. There's a lot of other aspects to it. One of the things that we do, we feel is important, is we're one of the primary funding entities for CAT. So we work with CAT on their transit development needs, and right now they're actually developing a plan, a rethink of the route system and how the overall transit entity behaves and provides their services. So that's something that I would say residents want to be aware of, that this transit development planning is underway, and they may be seeing some changes here in the future years. We also fund a program that's commonly known as commuter services, which is a ride sharing or a ride matching entity. So people that are looking for a way to work other than driving their own individual car. So if you're willing to carpool, vanpool, or otherwise get to your place of employment or to your doctor's office or that kind of thing, commuter services provides that service, and we help fund commuter services. Also, Wayne mentioned the bike share program. The bike share program, he's right, is incredibly popular. It's one of the most widely used bike share programs probably in Pennsylvania. We help fund and make sure and try to work to expand that program so you have access to bicycles as an alternative throughout. But then in terms of roadway improvement projects, some things that are on the tip, there's a number of safety-oriented projects that we're funding at the current time. We did a safety study this past year on what we call the Camp Hill to Capitol corridor. So that comes over the Harvey Taylor Bridge onto Forster Street outstate. There are projects that were an outgrowth of that effort that are now in the design phase, and we'll be working on those for a number of years to come. There have also been safety studies recently done on the Derry Street corridor and Paxton Street. And likewise, there are projects being funded here within the next few years to make both motorized and non-motorized safety improvements on those corridors. Then some other projects that are in the works. Market Street Bridge is going to see a significant improvement project over the next handful of years from both the vehicular travel and non-motorized. So the narrow sidewalks on there is something that we're looking to address moving forward. Maclay Street Bridge is scheduled for replacement and improvement. And another one that another busy intersection, especially this time of year with the farm show just wrapping up, that's in the works is Cameron and Maclay Street. That intersection is going to see a variety of improvements here in the upcoming years.
Yeah, that's all very exciting and much needed. Thanks for that
Sure.
explanation. And you touched on transit, which is another sort of pillar of how our focus here in the city. Let's talk specifically about 2020, and from a resident's perspective, talk about some of the things that they're going to see. I know that we currently have two major transportation projects moving into final design, but we also have more money continuing a project that's already begun in Mulder Square. So Ambrose, let's talk first about Mulder Square. What will people see first, and then what is the vision as we continue to move through the year?
Sure, Mayor. The first steps that we're going to take in Mulder Square is a sidewalk and sidewalk ramp project. That's going to focus on the Dairy Street extension running towards Sylvan Terrace. We're proposing a whole new sidewalk there, removing quite a few dead trees, just improving that whole corridor, sidewalk, ramps, moving straight through to Sylvan Terrace. Also on Summit Street, coming from Dairy, connecting to Mulberry Street, we're also going to address that area with sidewalk ramps. And that is in preparation for the larger Mulder Square project, which is going to do sidewalk ramps from the Mulberry Street Bridge all the way to a proposed traffic circle where Dairy and Mulberry come together. So there's quite a number of improvements around that traffic circle just for pedestrians. Coming into the traffic circle, the city is going to install a concrete island. It's going to be a refuge for people crossing that street, crossing Mulberry Street, so that there would be a pause. They don't have to cross the whole street all at once. This is in addition to Nectarine Street, a total rebuild there. It's not only going to be rebuilt, but improved aesthetically. It's going to use a lot of pavers. There's going to be extra lighting, and that's also going to flow into at the end of Dairy Street, just beyond Sylvan Terrace, flow into a park-type atmosphere where all that pavement's going to be torn out. Nice winding trail, improved stormwater handling capabilities will all be built into that section of the project.
It's really an amazing transformation. I think people that go over the Mulberry Street Bridge and look at this intersection of Mulberry and Dairy, which we're calling Mulder Square, they can already see the changes. They see it in the new housing authority structures, but it's really going to have the full impact once the streetscape is redesigned and done. You'll be managing that project. We'll be out there starting probably in the spring with concrete work, right?
Certainly will. Our goal is to have the first 1,000 square feet or so of sidewalk and 30-ish sidewalk ramps completed by June 30th, and then the larger project will, mesh with that, start around that time or before.
If the public's watching and they want to see some of the plans and descriptions of the project, is the best site to go to our Vision Zero website?
I would say that it is.
Okay.
Yes.
which is just visionzerohbg.org. And you can see the designs for Mulder Square, and you can see a lot. We're putting all of these projects under the Vision Zero rubric because they're really all about eliminating conflict between pedestrians, bicyclists, and others, and automobiles. Wayne, so that's going on in Allison Hill. Simultaneously, we are currently finishing designs for major transformation in Uptown. You've touched on it a little bit, but what will the public see very specifically on 7th Street and the 6th Street loop?
So 7th Street is about 90% drawing completion, working on some highway occupancy permits with PennDOT at the intersection of Her and 7th. That should wrap up here in the next couple months, and we'll be ready to go out for bid. So the 7th Street I would anticipate would go to construction first. That project is a little unique in that we're trying to coordinate very carefully with the construction of the federal courthouse. We don't want to shut down lanes while they're trying to move equipment in or finishing equipment and furniture and things like that. So we're trying to carefully coordinate that project. That project includes a roundabout at 7th and Riley, which does some of the traffic calming that was talked about. Obviously, roundabouts have that traffic calming perspective to them. Shortens the crosswalk distance. It also allows for 180-degree turns. So all that angled parking in front of the FIA complex would become a median refuge area for pedestrians. Think about FIA and all the pedestrians, all the employees that they have that park across the street and have to walk across to gain access to their facility. This will provide that refuge to them, and FIA is a funding partner in that project. It will also add a two-way cycle track along the west side of 7th Street. On 6th Street, which is currently 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, gets really clogged during school pickups and drop-offs. So a project that has already been bid out, would be ready for construction even before 7th Street, would be 6th Street between Riley and Boas, which would be basically a road diet, putting some parking in instead of the through lanes, which are not needed because it converts back to 2 lanes just above Riley anyway, and putting the turning lanes in and some bike lanes, some bike facilities. So those projects, in that area, Uptown, Midtown, we will see, at least starting on construction spring 2020.
Yeah. Well, you'll see 6th Street, right? And you've been working closely with the school district on that.
Yes, we have, Mayor, yes. So 6th Street, it's just basically paint. There's some removal of existing paint. So that, like I said, that project's already been awarded. So that could start as early as April 15th when we get some nice weather.
Yeah, and the plan is to relocate some of the metered parking that was on 7th Street into that corridor as a part of a shift, because the 7th Street project takes out all of the metered parking in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win for both the parking and the pedestrians and the users. I think on 7th Street that angle parking was underutilized, whereas on 6th Street we know it's used. You have the Broad Street Market and some of the businesses along 6th Street, in addition to the school district, which we're coordinating closely with on that.
Okay, and let's give a brief update as well on 2nd Street two-way, a major signature project that's moving along. Where do we stand on that?
So we finished all our concept designs and the public input as far as the concepts go. The concept that's shown here, Concept 1, which doesn't have bike lanes, but it does have sharrows, was the option. About 75, 77, I think it was, percent of those who responded to our surveys voted for this concept. I think the biking we can add on other corridors, but the focus on this one is more of the pedestrian and the sharrow, slowing down traffic so that the sharrow actually works. Which you see some mini roundabouts at Verbeck and some other intersections, and which we believe can do that, in addition to refuge areas at key intersections that provide that refuge for the pedestrian, and also have the same traffic calming effect as the bump outs that we talked about earlier. That project is in preliminary engineering now. So preliminary engineering and final design. We anticipate about 6 months, and then that project will go out for bid. And that one we expect to be a 2-year construction window. There's a lot of traffic signal rebuilds, traffic signal replacements with roundabouts, and just a lot of work. That'll be our most expensive project to date, in the last 5 years or so. So, we want to make sure we give a contractor a large enough construction window to complete the project.
That's very exciting. Steve, let's talk a little bit. You mentioned, first of all, some regional safety focused projects. I don't want to get too controversial here, but two areas that the city has continued issues with really are the intersection of Forster and Front Street, right after the Harvey Taylor Bridge. It's an area that we'd really like to see improvements. Another area is the State Street corridor after the State Street Bridge and going up towards the Civil War Museum. By all sort of objective measures, those are probably two of the least safe areas, not only in Harrisburg, but in the region. Both of those are state controlled roads, and both of them require the city working closely with PennDOT. And I think we've made progress in trying to come to a common understanding of why moving forward with improvements is important. Can you talk a little bit about Tri-County's role in that process?
Sure, and we're just part of that discussion process in between the city and PennDOT, involved in that. So I would say everyone in that group agrees that one of the key issues there is speed. People coming across the Harvey Taylor Bridge, entering the urban environment that is the city, not recognizing that they need to slow down, obey the traffic signals and those types of things. So some of the short-term things that I think we've reached agreement on that we're moving forward with would be some pavement markings, additional signage, crosswalk improvements and signal improvements in those areas to help make sure that people do slow down to a reasonable speed. And that's on both corridors. So that would affect not only, we'd have some things on the Harvey Taylor Bridge designed to slow people down as they come to the intersection that you mentioned with Front Street, and that they're more quickly aware of the change in
it's really the same corridor too. It's two different entry points to the city, and it's really a connecting corridor between the city and the region.
They really are. Both those, State Street and Forster Street, play important regional and city roles. So that's why we're trying to start with some things that pavement markings, improved crosswalks, some of those signal improvements that you may or may not be aware of, to get people across those roads safely. And then working together with the city and PennDOT to determine what long-term improvements or more expensive improvements might be additionally workable to try to help improve the safety. You mentioned bump outs, the boulevard settings. Some of those things are what's under consideration for hopefully near-term funding to help make both those roads safer.
Yeah, top priority for us, and we're really focused on that. Another area which requires sort of a regional focus is the Market Square Transfer Center, and I know that we've got both sort of short-term improvement plans that we're working closely with PennDOT and all the stakeholders, CAT and all the stakeholders on, and there's a longer-term potential relocation plan. In the short term, Wayne, you could talk about what people are going to see right away in terms of some basic safety improvements for the transfer center.
So there's a project right now in design. It's a very aggressive project being led by CAT, actually. They're the local sponsor. Commonwealth, the funding is being provided by the Commonwealth. City's involved because of the traffic signal, and ultimately the city owns the property that it then leases to CAT for that transportation transfer center. It's a very low budget, short-term improvements. You'll see some ADA ramp installed, I think 4 or 5. You'll see some bollards with chains that place the pedestrian in the proper path in that accessible route so that they're not crossing traffic at the improper location. There'll be some audible improvements. There'll be a speaking message that tells them when it's okay to cross. And then there'll be some what we call blank out signs. There'll be a message that comes up when it's okay to cross for the hearing impaired. They can utilize the signage. So it's very modest improvements. Lighting, there'll be some lighting upgrades, but we think it'll have a big impact. And that's a short term, as you mentioned, that's the short term. Still looking at the medium and long term solution to the problem. But there will also be pedestrian lead intervals added, which is something that we added to 3rd Street as well. So it gives pedestrians a 5-second lead before traffic has a green light. Gets that pedestrian out into the road where they can be seen by the motor vehicle operator, and the motor vehicle operator knows or should know that you do have to yield to pedestrians in crosswalks. So that'll add just one more signalized intersection with that pedestrian lead interval, in addition to 2nd and Chestnut, 3rd and Chestnut, 3rd and Walnut, 3rd and Market. So, as we increase our capacity downtown and provide those pedestrian lead intervals, those are proving counter safety measures that perform very well in other cities in the country.
That's great. That's exciting. I know there are some other changes planned for the downtown, specifically with regard to this east-west connector project, improvements at other key intersections. I think people are really excited about all of that. And then, of course, the long-term plan for the transfer center would be to potentially see it relocate a little bit closer to the train station, maybe in the area of the recently acquired by Peacer's former Patriot News lot, which has now been demolished, and see a sort of focused center for regional transportation there. Ambrose, final thoughts. I know you just joined the city about a year ago, right? And you had your first experience managing projects with the South Harrisburg paving project, which was a great success last year. What are you looking forward to personally from a project management standpoint in the new year?
Mayor, I had a great experience with my first project. One of the things I really enjoy about executing projects for the city is it's not just financial management, it's not just contractor management, you're interacting with the residents of the city. There's a very personal element to project management working for the city of Harrisburg. And I'm looking forward as we move forward to some of these other areas, 2nd Street, 7th Street, Mulder Square, I'm looking forward to personally interacting with every resident that we're doing a sidewalk for, that we're doing a ramp for. For a lot of the residents, the sidewalk is their front yard. The street is their neighborhood. So it's not just an engineering exercise. This is a very personal exercise. We're building the community by doing these projects.
That's great. And Steve, how can the public find out more about Tri-County regional planning, or maybe get more involved and learn more about what you do?
Sure. From a transportation perspective specifically, I'll say that I mentioned earlier that we do the 4-year programming of projects. We also do a 20-year planning horizon for transportation needs. So we just recently adopted that plan. So it's known as the HATS Regional Transportation Plan. But if any resident has the ability to help us identify localized needs throughout the region, if you go to the Tri-County website or search for Regional Transportation Plan Harrisburg, you'll find that website, and the first thing you'll see is a box that allows residents to identify needs, bring them to our attention so we can consider them for funding.
And what was that website again?
It's called HATS Regional Transportation Plan.
Okay.
That's what they can find. They'll see a gray box right at the top of the screen that says, do you want to help identify a transportation need? It asks about 10 or 12 questions, gives you an opportunity to put a point or a line on a map to identify where your area of concern is, and we use that to enter the process to hopefully get to funding to coordinate with city efforts and help get funding. So it's the most direct way for people to contribute to that process and see things done.
Okay, that's fascinating. Well, thank you all for coming and engaging in this great conversation today. I hope you at home learned a lot about what is to come here in the brand new year for 2020. Thank you for watching Word in the Burg, and until next time, I'm Mayor Eric Pappenfuss, and we are very, very excited about the future of Harrisburg.